Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Black Futures, the Sankofa series hosted by Humanities Amped with the help of our partners at Metromorphosis and the East Baton Rouge Parish School System. We are excited to share this event with you. Teachers, to share this event with students, we encourage you to log into Zoom through your computer. You can do this with your class meeting open and share the Zoom screen with your class through Google Meet. Another option is to watch this event through live stream at the Humanities Amped YouTube channel. Just search Humanities Amped YouTube and our channel should pop up. We encourage students to submit comments and questions through the chat through you or through this form. bit.ly/BR Black History. Again, that's no caps. bit.ly/BR Black History. We have an impactful and fun program for you today, but before we get started, let me introduce myself. My name is Brianna Collins, and I am a proud McKinley High School graduate and Humanities Amped alumna. I attended Northwestern State University, where I majored in mass communication and minored in military science and English. I currently work as a television news producer at WAFB and serve in the United States Army Reserve. I serve now as a board member for Humanities Amped. I am a member of the Action Committee for Dialogue on Race and will soon be training as a moderator for the organization. But that's enough about me. Let's get started. This year at Humanities Amped, we are celebrating the first of our three core values, beloved community. As we think about the issues going on in the world, this aspect of our organizational vision to nurture a community of lifelong learners and civic leaders has never been more important to our individual and collective well-being. Dr. Martin Luther King was known to talk about beloved community. When he talked about beloved community, he was talking about calling up the best in one another. Beloved community is a way to summon our strength and imagination so that we can work together to create our best collective futures. Black Futures, the Sankofa series, is hosted in partnership with Metromorphosis because a celebration of Black history requires beloved community. Sankofa means revisiting the past for its usefulness. It is an African word from the Akan tribe in Ghana. The symbol for Sankofa is the bird that you will see throughout this program. This entire program encourages students to think about themselves as beneficiaries of ancestral knowledge, victories, and hopes, which is why our event today will include 2 intergenerational dialogues and end with a fresh heat, the Griot edition, an art exhibition where students will have the chance to amplify their voice. But before we get started, I would like to take a moment to take in this poster created by Roderick Wright, who is a freshman at McKinley High School. Roderick's artistic statement explains, this poster explains how John Lewis impacted the current state of USA as a minister, as a civil rights activist. Thank you so much for that, Roderick. Your guidance, Ms. Hammond, and shout out to my alma mater, the McKinley High School Panthers. So let's get started with our second event. In the spirit of Sankofa, we will have a dialogue with our community elder, Dr. Press Robinson, and youth activist, Anthony Kenney. To prepare for this event, we have been reading the recently released report, Black Baton Rouge, Yesterday and Today, Looking Back to Effectively Move Forward, written by Chris Tyson, Lori Martin, and published by Metromorphosis. The authors explain, Baton Rouge Black residents experienced unequal treatment for centuries, but maintained the belief that change was possible. Dr. Press Robinson's life is a prime example of this fact. On May 13, 2002, Dr. Robinson was appointed to serve as the 6th Chancellor of Southern University at New Orleans. Dr. Robinson is a seasoned administrative professional in the higher educational communities, as evidenced by a history of service as an administrator in the Southern University system in a variety of executive positions, including Chancellor of Southern University at Shreveport, Interim Chancellor, Southern University at New Orleans, and many more positions. In addition, Dr. Robinson is a dedicated educator who is devout in his endeavors to ensure that no child nor high school graduate is left behind. This is pronounced through his many years as a teacher and researcher in chemistry at Southern University at Baton Rouge. There, he was ranked a full professor, as well as 22 years of service as an elected member of the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board, where he served 1 term as vice president and 3 terms as president. In addition to service in the various public school systems and higher educational institutions, Dr. Robinson is an accomplished professional in the corporate and business community, as documented in the records of his experience as a research chemist at Eli Lilly and Company, Mound Laboratory, General Electric Company, and many more. Finally, Dr. Robinson received a PhD in physical chemistry from Howard University in 1964 and a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry from Morehouse College in 1959. I can really go on and on about Dr. Robinson's many accomplishments, but for the sake of brevity, I will stop here. As we pick up the torch from our elders, we see the new generation of leadership in Anthony Kenney. Anthony Bernard Kenney Jr. was born in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, to the parents of Joyce Kenney and Anthony Kenney Sr. He is a 2019 graduate and alumnus of the Southern University and A&M College. There, he majored in mass communications with a concentration in public relations. He is currently a graduate student at Louisiana State University's Manship School of Mass Communication, pursuing his master's in strategic communication and public affairs. During his matriculation at Southern, he was part of numerous organizations, such as the Student Government Association, the 2018-2019 SGA Student Body President, Human Jukebox Marching Band, and Spring 19 initiate of the Beta Sigma chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Currently, he is the legislative aide for the Louisiana State Representative Ted James in District 101. Lastly, he is a part of various community organizations such as Bike and Vote and the vice chairman of the Louisiana Leadership Institute. Dr. Robinson and Anthony are living examples of the belief that change is possible, and we're so proud to have them with us today. Throughout the dialogue, feel free to provide reactions and commentary in the chat and ask questions that we can respond to in the Q&A. If you're watching the live stream and can't access the chat, send in your questions on the Q&A forum at bit.ly/BR Black History. Again, that's no caps, bit.ly/BR Black History. We want to hear from you, so please don't be shy. Questions and responses are welcome from the audience and will be addressed at the end. Ms. Cooper and Mr. Marcel Williams are in the chat and they want to know what you think. Share your name, and if you're in class right now, tell us your school too. Now I will pass off the mic to Anthony to start.
All right. Thank you so much, Brianna, for that phenomenal introduction. Man, I am surely just honored to be in the same presence of such a giant, a legend of a man. Mr. Robinson, I know throughout, I'm gonna say Brother Robinson, because me and Dr. Robinson, man, we're both in the same fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. So for anybody out there, I keep saying brother, brother, brother. It's a deeper thing, but it's like I say, he's my good brother, he's my elder. And I'm so excited to be here, and I'm so excited to have this conversation. Dr. Robinson, it is an honor. Like we talked before, it's an honor to be here in the same conversation, same dialogue. And I always say, man, we have to give our flowers to those who came before us and paved the way. I could definitely say, just listening to your resume, some things I didn't much know. Literally just now, I'm just finding out. I did my prior research, but a lot of things he just said, I'm like, wow. And I'm so excited. I know this conversation here, we both are different eras, like you say, intergenerational, and I'm just excited to dig deep into your mind. So let's get started. Dr. Robinson, anything you got to say before we get the show on the road?
It's a pleasure to be here, Anthony, and especially to be on this program. Hopefully that we can reach a lot of students and public people out there. It's good for me to talk to somebody like yourself. You know, our legacies have to go on. And we're looking forward to you moving that forward.
Yes, sir. Well, Dr. Robinson, I definitely appreciate that. And let's get started. We don't want to waste no time. We want to get started and get some great information going. So, Dr. Robinson, like our beautiful host, Ms. Collins said, man, she talked about your early beginnings in education, your focus on higher education, your focus in your early days. So take us back. Take us back when you first started as a young man, as a young college. So let's start there. And what sparked your interest to be an advocate, to be a change agent? Because during your time, it was a different dynamic. You had segregation. You have civil rights going on. Like, I just want to know, like, during those times, like, what inspired you, what driven you, and what lit that fire under you to start your work?
Well, Anthony, you know, I don't know that there was a conscientious desire on my part to be an activist. I was at Morehouse College, of course, and being a chemistry major, most of my time was devoted to the classroom because, a lot of times when friends of mine were out on the lawn enjoying an afternoon with their girlfriend, I was in the chemistry lab trying to get my experiments done. But I think my first foray into getting involved into something meaningful outside of that was my involvement in the election of the first Black alderman in the city of Atlanta. His name was Alexander. I don't remember his first name, but we fought very hard to get that accomplished because we recognized that Black folk needed to have a voice. And, being at Morehouse, um, it wasn't thought about that we ought to be doing those kinds of things. But I think that was the beginning of it. And I didn't pay a lot of attention to that, but I enjoyed it. And it gave me an idea of how I could have my voice heard.
Great, great. And I think one thing you mentioned too, I know you mentioned a lot about Morehouse. Quickly, I know part of Black History Month, our HBCUs, which are historical Black colleges and universities, are training grounds for our current and many past advocates, change agents such as Dr. Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, and X, Y, and Z. So tell me, what role did Morehouse play in starting your stomach ground? Like I know I went to Southern University. I know Morehouse is a private institution amongst HBCUs. So during your time in Morehouse, what different organizations, I know we want to definitely preach to kids to go to school, to go to post-secondary education. What advice would you give to anybody who wants to go to HBCU, that wants to be a change agent, that wants to go into advocacy?
Well, the first thing is HBCUs are institutions that not only know the history of Blacks in this country and the world, but we live it every day. Um, Going to Morehouse, of course, was something special to me because Dr. Benjamin E. Mays was the president at the time that I was there. And Benny Mays was known all over the United States and the world as a very accomplished speaker, as a very knowledgeable individual, someone who had the respect of important people throughout the country and the world. And just having the opportunity to having met him, to listen to him speak, uh, to go sit in his office, for example, and tell him, Dr. Mays, if I don't get some help from somewhere, I'm going to have to drop out of school. And to have him says, well, let me think about it and we'll see what we can do. And he did do something. He gave me a scholarship that semester after my initial scholarship had run out. And I stayed in school. And because of that, I graduated and I went on to get my degrees at Howard. But I think the thing that really um, inspired me was just being in the presence of someone that great. He was a wonderful guy.
Awesome, awesome. And kind of throw the boomerang back my way. When speaking about HBCUs, I could definitely say HBCUs have changed the lives of so many young Black men and women across this nation. Just being able, when I first went embarked going to HBCU, Southern University for me, it just screamed everything to be a change agent here in Baton Rouge. And I know we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I just want to kind of, as we talk about HBCUs, I just always want to implore and be an advocate. I tell anybody, once you become an alum of HBCU, an ambassador forever. And during my time at Southern University, being a part of the Student Government Association, one of the biggest things my advisors and my faculty members told me, man, think about people first. It's a selfless position. Going into civic engagement, being a public servant, being a public leader, even on the college campus is early stepping grounds. Regardless in student government, you being a fraternity, sorority, X, Y, and Z, it starts there. And I think as African American, as Black people, we oftentimes want to gravitate towards things that look like us and that's a safe haven for us. And I think HBCUs serve as a safe haven and training ground for us to go into and become what we need to be when we go out to the real world. A lot of people say, well, HBCUs, It don't prepare you for the real world. Well, I tell people, if it don't prepare me for the real world, that means the real world might not be meant for me, but I'm creating spaces for people that look like me to prosper and open doors up for people behind me. So I always want to tell that HBCUs are definitely some of the great. I call it the Wakandas. I don't know if you watched the movie Black Panther or remember with the late Chadwick Boseman. I call it our Wakandas, and we have to protect our Wakandas. I tell you, any person that's an ambassador or that's alumni for HBCUs, man, we are gatekeepers, because we know the people that came before us. We know the change agents that came through HBCUs who have changed the landscape. The Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, that speaks volumes to itself. And without even going to depth about that, it just shows that HBCUs is breaking barriers every day. And I'm so glad individuals such as yourself, myself, and numerous other people have had the opportunity to experience and go through and be cultivated at HBCU. So for anybody out there, I just want to say, when you're doing your research, especially my high school students, when you're doing your research, think about HBCUs. Think about, when you think about people like Dr. Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, Kamala Harris, and great individuals, they all went to HBCUs, and research why they went, and they all had their respective answers. So I'm excited to know that you went and was cultivated, and I could talk about it all day. But any question you want to ask me before we keep going?
Well, before I do that, Angela, let me just amplify a little bit on what you're saying there. I spent my entire career, not only my schooling career, but my career afterwards at an HBCU. I came to Southern University right out of Howard University after receiving my PhD. I think maybe actually in September 1963 when I arrived at Southern University, and I was awarded my PhD in 1964. At the May graduation. But sometimes we seem to think that if we don't go to the so-called white institutions, that we don't get the kind of education that we deserve to have or can get. But let me just tell you, it doesn't matter so much which institution you attend. The important thing is what you put into your efforts at those institutions. You can go to any institution in this country and you can get a good education, but you've got to be the spark to cause that to happen. You can't play. You can't spend your freshman and sophomore years having a good time and then trying to make it up your junior and senior years and then end up with a 3.8 or 3.5 average. It ain't going to happen like that. You got to be serious about it. So you got to put in the time and the effort. But being at an HBCU not only prepares you for the real world, because it is the real world. I mean, it's the world that we know. And being at an institution with people that you are comfortable with can make an awful lot of difference in how you not only see the world, but what you do after you've been there. So I just want to echo your thoughts about asking the students to consider going to an HBCU. You can get the education that you need. You just have to put the work in as you would anywhere else. Now, Anthony, tell me a little bit about what sparked your interest. But before you do that, tell me what you think an activist is.
So an activist for me is a person that sees an issue in the community, that sees a certain spark in the community or a certain issue that needs to be addressed, and goes out their way to advocate as far as, somebody feel as if their opportunity or somebody is felt wrong, right? And I think a person who is an activist see issues and wants to amplify those voices of the unheard. When I think about activists as growing up, before I really got into advocacy and kind of a little bit of activism myself in different issues. I saw people like Dr. Martin Luther King. I saw different activists in the Baton Rouge community around the Alton Sterling town. I'm like, wow, like regular people, like they don't have to be elected officials. They ain't have to be somebody with a fancy title. Regular, everyday people stood out on faith, stepped out on faith, and went out and said, you know what, I'm gonna fight for my people, and I want to be a voice for my people, regardless of what's going on. And to me, activism is sacrificing self for the greater good. I'm not saying more so sacrifice like you're sacrificing your life for X, Y, and Z, but being able to take risk in order to have the benefit the next person or the community around you.
Well, I hope that the students who are on the program are really listening to what you just said. about what an activist is. You know, you don't have to be born one. You don't have to be a special person. You know, you do have to have that passion, however, that you talked about. And it doesn't have to be any special passion. It can be about anything. And most people who end up being activists don't necessarily think about, I'm going to be an activist or I'm going to dream to be an activist. It happens because you do have that passion about something that you want to see changed. Well, tell me what particular event got you really, really going at Southern?
Well, during my time at Southern,
Yes.
for me, wow. So a lot of people think, man, Anthony, was you in student government all 4 years? So no, matter of fact, I wasn't. My first year I went to Southern, I marched in the band. I love the band. Shout out to the Human Jukebox marching band. But during my time, prior in high school, I was in student government, student council, and X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, wow, like I want to continue this. And I always saw myself like end up being a leader in different space without even much thinking about it. My nickname in high school used to be Mr. President because everybody used to call on me to be in student council, student government, and X, Y, and Z. And I think for myself as a leader, I saw as near my purpose that I can never run away for what God called for me, right? And I always saw myself, even now as an official capacity, being able to go in and just lead in any capacity. And at Southern University, being around so many like-minded individuals, I saw myself, there's so many issues that a lot of people don't know about internally. I love my Southern University, but I always say our schools will be always so much better, right? And I think in different curriculums and different situations on campus like that, we need those voices. We need people to step out and just like activism and say, hey, I want to advocate for my students. I want to advocate for what my students want and what my students need at the end of the day. When I became student government president, my platform was all or nothing. Anybody that knew me was like that either I was gonna give it my all, I can't give nothing at all because it ain't no gray area in leadership because either you got to give your all for the people or something is gonna slack at the end of the day. And during my time as student government president, one of the biggest things I learned that you have to always think about not yourself but students. When you start thinking about self as a leader, you start putting your own selfish pride and ego into the mix, and that's not what leadership is about. That's what not activism is all about. Being a leader and what during my time at Southern University and being like civically engaged is just knowing that it's always a room to impact somebody. And for myself, my mentors and people before me, some of my mentors was student government president. I think one of my biggest mentors in my life is current State Senator Cleo Fields. He was student government president in the late 80s. And being in his program in the Louisiana Leadership Institute, he always taught us in our Saturday classes that being a leader is saying that each and every day I will give my 24/7 best to make the best environment for the person next to me. And that went with me so long because I said, wow, like people really sacrifice their life and time, to impact other people. And as I got older, I understood because I'm a first generation college grad. So for me, I didn't have nobody who was in student government. I didn't have nobody who was in fraternity or sorority, X, Y, and Z. So everything for me was a first time experience. So when I got in spaces with different people, when I got in spaces with people who are change agents in X, Y, and Z, I said, wow, like I see myself, like I saw the qualities within myself. And being in those type of environments, it's almost like iron sharpens iron, right? When you've been around many different leaders, you're like, wow, like I want to step my game up. Like I want to be a leader. I want to be X, Y, and Z. And during my years leading up to being student government president, I used to say each and every SGA president was a person of the people, was a man of the people, was a woman of the people. And I'm like, man, like I don't want to be just a man for popularity. I want to be the man because I say, wow, I impacted somebody's life. And for me, it's never about trying to impact each and every person or try to reach each and every person because you can't please everybody. But if I can impact one person during my time, during my tenure, I'll feel accomplished because at the end of the day, I always tell people it's about how you make somebody feel in the long run, regardless of how somebody is benefiting some in that right period of time. If you can make somebody feel safe in their space, you're doing your job as a leader. You can make somebody feel impacted. You can make somebody feel empowered in your space. Being a leader is that route for you because at the end of the day, we're all leaders in different avenues. Everybody can lead from the back and somebody can lead from the front, but everybody not going to be the same type of leader. But for me, without really going too down a rabbit hole, Southern just really cultivated me to go and out front and be unapologetic about for the people around you. If you want to impact, you have to be unapologetic about making a better world and a better place, a better space for the person next to you.
Do you believe that there's an age limit to being a leader?
No, not at all. You can start as young as you can. We have seen so
Amen to
many
that.
young people start off young. For me, my mom, my dad, shout out to my parents. I know they're watching out there, man. They started me off young. I used to be speaking at churches and X, Y, and Z, but I used to always be the first one to take the initiative to do something. I think small times along the way, it was me being a leader without me actually calling myself a leader, right? And being always want to speak, always want not to be like the first person in line or be like the first person to always do something, but more so just be a good person all around. That makes you a leader too. And so my parents slowly grew me into that without me really thinking about it. And even though I didn't know I was gonna be SJ president 10, 13, 15 years later, but it was small things of just being a good person around and impacted people young. And I tell people, man, some of our advocates started off real young. They ain't start off in college. Some of them started off in high school. As you can see, during the most recently Black Lives Matter Matters movement, a lot of people was out there in those streets, high school students. Here in Baton Rouge, when we had the Black Lives Matter protest downtown, it was organized strictly by high school students, no politicians, no elected officials, no community influencers. It was high school students who say, hey, I see this in my community, this is wrong, and I want to start the movement. And guess what? They had the biggest protest in Baton Rouge. And so that goes to show, that speaks volumes as far as anybody can feel empowered by any type of issue in the community. And for all my young people out there, man, don't feel like, oh, I got to wait to college to do this. No, you can start at middle school. You can start at high school. Find a group of people that share the same issue. They want to see a difference. Find a group of people who want to make some difference in Baton Rouge, right? You want to bring it home and say, hey, let's get together. Let's go to the Break Center. Let's go to North Baton Rouge. Let's go to Scotlandville and say, hey, we want to talk about the issues in the community. And guess what? Young people, you hold the power to everything, because the young people in the community is the future of the whole entire community, the whole entire state, and the whole entire country. So, man, start off young, find an issue, and read into it. Read about how past civic engagement people and leaders went out really young and started on their way.
Amen. Well said. Well said.
So what's kind of, I know we talked about Baton Rouge a little bit, so let's bring it home. So when you came to Baton Rouge, what was like, I know those times you talked about how people definitely had civil rights going on, had segregation going on. And I know Dr. King was alive. You caught a little bit of Dr. King during your time as well, right? You was able to witness a little bit of him. Like, talk about that a little bit. Talk about, as a young person, as a young man, as a young adult, seeing Dr. King, Malcolm X, these Rosa Parks and these civil rights leaders on the forefront. Just tell us about, from your perspective, what did that mean to you? How did that impact you? And when you first witnessed this going on, these leaders on the forefront, like what was stirred up inside of you from these individuals?
Well, of course, when I got to Morehouse, I was about, I guess, 7 years or so behind Martin Luther King. But obviously, we heard a lot about him as a Morehouse man. I even got the chance to visit his dad's church, which was next to the campus, and so maybe even saw him once at that church. You know, being in that presence, and then coming to Baton Rouge or being at Howard and knowing what was going on and watching Martin lead the country with his nonviolent movement was an inspiration. Everybody wanted to kind of be like him. Not that you thought about, hey, I could do this, or maybe this guy over here can do that, but just unknowingly building inside of you that desire to go out and do something to change the world and to join Martin in his movement. So it was really, really not only exciting, but very rewarding. Now, when I got to Baton Rouge, naturally it was 1963. I think the sit-ins were just occurring downtown at the Crest counter and so on. I can remember I had a Washington, D.C. license plate on my car, and my roommate and I went somewhere in one evening for an outing, and on the way back we passed a Baton Rouge police car with two officers in it. because I had that Washington, D.C. license plate, they followed us all the way from downtown Baton Rouge to Scotlandville to our home, watched us go inside because they probably thought that we were someone from out of town who came to stir up trouble, as they always said. But I was here to work at Southern. But one of the first questions I had for the dean of the university at the time, who was Dr. Elton C. Harrison, was, what is Southern University doing out in the community? What involvement do you have with the Scotlandville community? What involvement do you have with the larger Baton Rouge community? And basically, the answer came back, very little. So I immediately started asking my colleagues, why aren't we more involved? Why aren't we looking to make things happen out in Scotlandville and out in the Baton Rouge community? That led later on, of course, to my non-educational career, which was the owner and operator of an engineering consulting firm that was put together in 1972 by myself, a chemist, and about 11 other Southern University engineers. I was the only non-engineer in the firm, and it was an engineering consulting firm. But I wanted to make a difference. At the time that firm was formed, we were the only Black minority-owned engineering consulting firm south of Atlanta, east of California. And so it was something unheard of, but it was something that, to me, was satisfying that passion I had to get involved in the community. So, you know, there are other things about that time period that I'm not quite so pleased about, and that, of course, leads us maybe later into the desegregation talks. But and I was definitely involved in that here in Baton Rouge.
And that's wow. And I tell her over here, and I'm just really setting it back because I think in the beginning you said as well, you were 7 years behind Dr. Martin Luther King in school. And I tell a lot of people, when you think about conversation, when the Black Lives Matter movement was going, I tell a lot of people, man, that time is not too far long gone. Like a lot of our elders who are still alive currently was in that, and we're seeing the same thing that's going on now in their time as well. And that time period is not that much longer. Like we have a lot of people who can still have vivid memories to everything. I can, like, is alive to compare and contrast though, and really compare those times because they said they share similar situations. But I think a lot of people didn't know, like a lot of the bus boycott movements was sparked here in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge set the standard for a lot of boycotts across the entire nation. And kind of dive and talked about, I know we had a lot of different change agents here in Baton Rouge, a lot of civil rights activists. During your time at Southern University, what was some distinguished individuals throughout the Baton Rouge community that you work with, kind of segue into the desegregation efforts that you all had?
Oh man, the list is a long one, Anthony, a long one. You know, people like Attorney Johnny Jones, who was working with the NAACP to work for desegregation of schools, Pearl George, Joseph Delpit, Jewel Newman, Richard Turnley, Jetson out of Eden Park, Raymond Jetson's dad. I can't think of Raymond's dad's first name right now, but you know, people like that who saw the need to make changes. I mean, Pearl George went to jail because she was concerned about Black kids not being able to swim in swimming pools in Baton Rouge. You know, I'm not advocating that students or activists always have to do that, but sometimes that's necessary. You do what is necessary to get the change done. But people like those, all of us have to stand on the shoulders of somebody. None of us are who we are just because of ourselves. And so when you think about the Pearl Georges, the Joe Delpits, who was the first city councilman in Baton Rouge, or the Richard Turnley, who was the first Black legislator, state legislator from Baton Rouge. You know, you have to understand that these people worked hard to achieve these goals, and whatever we may have accomplished was because we stood on their shoulders. And you are standing on somebody's shoulder. The people who come after you are going to stand on your shoulders, or perhaps even on mine, perhaps, yeah, if I could even use that analogy. But we all stand on someone's shoulders. We have to appreciate that, and we have to appreciate our history. Unfortunately, our history doesn't get told. It has never been told correctly and completely, and I don't know how long it's going to be before it does get told. But you can pick up a history book. For example, there was an article in today's paper from someone, I think maybe in New Orleans, about the fact that her child was in school, had a history book that was over 300 pages in length, and the word racism was mentioned just once in that entire book. In the particular section that dealt with desegregation or with civil rights, there were mentioned 27 different people, and maybe 3 or 4 of those were Black folk. Even though we played tremendous roles in the development of this country, in the development of the civil rights movement, but none of that gets told. It's not taught by the historians. It's not in the history books. It's unfortunate because in many instances, our parents and grandparents don't talk about our history either, as we should.
Definitely, definitely. I could say, man, over the past 2 or 3 years, I have learned so much additional Black history. I wish we was taught in our schools. That's one thing I think I tell a lot of my educators who are in the school system down here in East Baton Rouge Parish, man. We need events such as this, dialogue such as this, that we can educate our young people, especially here in Baton Rouge. Like I think a lot of our young kids look towards other places, right? Everybody wants to rush to these other places, other cities around the country, which is fine and dandy, but you have so much history right in your own backyard.
Mhm.
And the history right in your own backyard is what ignited a flame to so many movements across history books, right? And so I think what you said was powerful. We wouldn't be who we are without standing on the shoulders of somebody. I can say I'm so thankful I'm able to stand on the shoulders of you as well. A lot of the work I can say, I'm currently doing, I will do in the future, man, is because you open up those doors. And I just want to say I appreciate you for that. Definitely. But kind of segueing to you being the first African American to sit on the school board, like that's powerful. I think 2 current members right now on the school board, I definitely look up to, kind of like big brothers to me, is Deidris Landis and Tremere Howard. Great young brothers, but not in the 30s yet, doing a great job, being advocates, seeing young people, young Black men such as themselves, being on the forefront of issues for here in East Baton Rouge Parish, especially on the school board as well. And I definitely think, you open those doors. I think they look up to you. They talk about you. I never met you yet. And they come full circle. They always mention your name in conversation. I was like, wow, President Robinson, that's like a pretty cool guy, pretty powerful guy. And so now just knowing your full role and capacity, when you got on the school board, what issue did you wanted to tackle? What changes did you make happen during your tenure in time?
Well, Anthony, it's rather strange why I ran for the school board in the first place. As a chemistry teacher at Southern, my students were having difficulty. And they were having difficulty not because they couldn't understand the concepts of chemistry. They were having trouble with reading, writing, and arithmetic. So my brilliant thought was, if I could just get to the school board and I could get my students to concentrate on those 3 areas, when they got to Southern, then they wouldn't have the problem that they were having in my class. I know that was a pretty narrow thing, but initially I found out that the first thing that happened is that I had to run ward wide at that time. And of course, we were outnumbered white to Black in either ward, 1 two or three. There were three wards. And I ran in 1972 for the first time. I lost to J.O. Claudel, who was from Baker. And I ran against him again in 1976 and lost again. Well, in 1973, Governor Edwards, not John Bell, but the other Edwards, our first Edwards, had appointed Lawrence Moak to serve out an unfinished term of Coach Melvin Geller, who was a white board member who died while in office. Moak served in that position for about a year and a half. And of course, because there was more than 1 year left on the term, a special election was called as the law dictates. Well, Moak ran for that position and he lost. Well, that just emphasized to me even further that there was no way in the world that we were going to be able to get on the school board, have our voices heard with a ward-wide system of election. Along with George Eames and several other people, A.C. Belton, who was from Scotlandville, we had filed suit against the school board in 1974 for single-member districts. But the board, of course, didn't want to take us very seriously. Well, when Moak lost, that just emphasized that we had to have those single-member districts. So I again filed suit against the board for those single-member districts. And in 1977, we won that suit via negotiation and was awarded 3 seats on the board. And it was important that that there were 3 seats because there were Scotlandville, there was Eden Park, and then there was South Baton Rouge. Had we gotten the 1 school board member that the board was offering, then we would have had a conflict between who appoints that 1 board member. I didn't want that to happen. So I said we would compromise if they gave us 3, and they did. That means that we could have a board member then from Scotlandville, 1 from Eden Park, and 1 from South Baton Rouge. So in 1980, Eva Lagarde ran from South Baton Rouge. Frank Milligan ran from Eden Park. I ran from Scotlandville. I was elected in September. Eva and Frank, of course, had to go through the runoff in November. That, of course, resulted in my being the first elected black member of the school board. I was seated immediately because the desegregation discussions were going on. They wanted me involved in that. And then when Frank and Eva won in November, they too were seated early because the normal seating time was in January the following year. But we were trying to get the community and the school board to understand that it was important that Black children in East Baton Rouge Parish had the same opportunities to learn in the schools of the parish that white kids had. I have to go back a little ways to 1970 when I was involved, and I'm not quite sure how I got involved in these conversations, but these were conversations between the NAACP, the U.S. Justice Department in Washington, D.C., and the local school system about desegregation. And I tried to get the NAACP to not go for desegregation, but to go for resources. Ask for the money, because we had the best teachers already. Most of our teachers had master's degrees or master's plus 30 degrees. And the white schools did not have that. So had we gotten the monies that we needed to boost our educational system, just personally, I think we probably would have been better off because we ain't got no desegregation in this parish. We are probably in the same position now that we were in 1970 or even worse, because most of the schools have kids who have majority Black populations.
sure. I know Brianna has something to say.
Yes, you guys have about 2 more minutes left, and then we'll start questions.
Okay.
Gotcha. You see, we both long with it, Brother Robinson. So you see how that time went on by.
It went on
So,
very quickly, didn't it?
but very quickly, was kind of segue to current day. If you was to say something now, would you feel as if Baton Rouge has progressed in various areas since your time in leadership, since your prime days of being a leader, being a public servant here in the Baton Rouge and North Baton Rouge and Scholarville community?
I'd answer that question by saying yes and no. In some areas, yes. In school desegregation, no. No, I don't think we're desegregated at all. We never have been. But again, there are some improvements that have been made. I mean, you look around now and we have a Black mayor. We just got, I think, 4 new Black councilman persons. You know, that's certainly an improvement, because I go back to my day and Joe Delpit was the very first. You know, we have Black judges. I was fortunate enough to be the campaign manager for Judge Freddie Pitcher in all of his 3 campaigns. I think he had City Court, 19th Judiciary, and the Appeals Court. And we won all of those. But yes, things have changed. But the more things change, the more they seem to stay the same. There's always going to be a reason to fight for what we want. And we just have to have people like you who have the energy and who have the foresight to make that happen.
Wow, that was so beautiful. I just want to thank both of you for talking about your experiences and really challenging us to think about what activism means and looks like for us. One of my biggest takeaways from you guys' conversation is the importance of pursuing an education and being self-motivated enough to make the best out of every single opportunity. We now want to give you all a chance to respond to some of the comments and questions from the audience. Audience, it's not too late to send in your thoughts and your questions. We want to hear from you. So send in your thoughts through the chat or the Google form sent in the welcome email. Let's start with this question from Jordan at Liberty High. What is youth activist? What is the end goal? Civil rights elder, is today's world what you envisioned it would look like? We can start off with Anthony. What is the end goal?
What's the end goal?
For your activism.
My activism. So my end goal, being from Baton Rouge, I'm from the North Baton Rouge community by way of Scholarville. So I have a love for Baton Rouge, but more specifically North Baton Rouge, being that I went to Scholarville High School, and then I graduated from Southern University, both primary schools in North Baton Rouge area. And for me, I want to see a better Baton Rouge. A lot of young people around my age, they're so quick. I want to get out of BR. I want to get out of BR. I want to go here. I want to go there. I just want to leave BR. But I tell a lot of people, before I leave my own backyard, my own home, my house, I need to make sure my house is well upkept before I leave and go to another spot or another institution or another house, right? And for me, before I ever say I want to leave, it's always, I call it a double-edged sword. Not really a double-edged sword. It's more so a blessing and a curse in disguise as well. Because a lot of people say, a lot of people don't want to get stuck in Baton Rouge, but I see it not as a curse. It's more so a blessing, because you have those people who see a better Baton Rouge, right? And for me, my activism and advocacy is wanting to know that when I have my own kids, great grandkids, grandkids, and X, Y, and Z, I want them to be proud of the progress that my generation is currently doing to make Baton Rouge a better place, right? Baton Rouge can't become the best city in the world overnight. It's not going to, I'm not going to say it's not going to happen in my generation, right. But for me, I want to say by the time because activism never ends. I tell people you're an activist until the time for you get called home, right? But for me, I just want to see Baton Rouge as a highly competitive city. As I envision Baton Rouge as a city of the standard of a Dallas, of a Houston, of Atlanta, or Washington, D.C., as one of those cities like, okay, Baton Rouge is a powerhouse of a city. Baton Rouge has produced some dominant and great individuals, and Baton Rouge is a prospering city for anybody to come to. So I want Baton Rouge to be one of the most critical cities in the South here in the United States.
Thank you, Anthony. Dr. Robertson, your question is today's world what you envisioned it would be like?
No, Brianna, I can't say that it is. Talking, I guess, a little bit about the the end goal of activism, you know, that is access and opportunity is the end goal. But that's not ever going to be achieved by any one activist or one time frame. It's an ongoing process. So even though things are not where I had hoped they would be today, as I said a bit earlier, there have been some improvements in various areas, but I think there's an awful lot that we could have done that we did not do because, you know, if you remember the Supreme Court decision back in 1954, they said desegregate with all deliberate speed. Well, there were people who said that deliberate speed ain't gonna ever happen. Well, there are still people who, even though they may not be saying that, I'm afraid they think that way today. And so, no, things are not what I'd like for them to be. I'd like for us to be a lot further down the road towards equal access and opportunity. But we have to keep fighting and keep fighting. And perhaps one day we'll get there, but no time soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So Nyla from Liberty High asks, with being an activist, did you have anyone close to you try to convince you that this was something that you shouldn't do or a path that you should not take?
Well, for me, no. No one ever said to me what I should not do. Um, Quite frankly, I think by the time I had finished college and come to Southern and really got active in community activities, you know, I was my own person. So I was able to do what I thought was right. Now, of course, there were people, as I said before, whose shoulders I stood upon, who helped me, like Pearl George and Delpit and Turnley and Jetson and others. You know, I knew about Thurgood Marshall, you know, and his Supreme Court service and so on. So those things certainly pushed me forward. But I think I had a blank slate to do what I wanted to do.
What about you, Anthony?
For me, not more so that try to discourage. I think the only thing they always tell me never try to pour from an empty cup. And I feel like that was probably I would say it was bad advice, but it's pretty good advice. You don't want to burn yourself out. And I think with advocacy and activism, I think a lot of people that I know who do the same line of work, they all say, you know, you can get burnt out. So I think the only thing they have tried to tell me is not to deter me, but to make sure that your heart is pure doing the work. At the same time, you're taking care of yourself along the way. You don't want your well-being or your health to fall, you know what I'm saying, into work. You know, you want to be as healthy as your work is being healthy as well.
Thank you. So Jeremiah from Liberty High asks, how do you think activists should approach their causes today?
Well, activism doesn't really change. I mean, you know, if you have a passion for something, you go after it. You try to make the change that you think is necessary. All activists do that, and there's no changing that over time. So it doesn't matter whether you're a teenager, high schooler, middle schooler, an old person like myself. The process is pretty much the same. You just go for it. You just go for it. Now, obviously, you have to sometimes plan what you do and how you do it. But the first thing is to have that passion for change and be willing to go out and act on it.
Anthony?
I would say, kind of piggyback off Dr. Robinson, be intentional. Be intentional in the things you want to see and the type of activism and the issues you want to tackle. Don't try to be Superman. Activism is a team effort. It's a community-wide effort. But just be intentional in the things you want to do. And at the end of the day, you don't have to be the most well-spoken person all the time. I'm a type of person, you know, I don't believe in respectability politics. I feel like I could respect somebody speaking to me. I could respect their opinion. They could be in a suit like myself, or they could be in a Nike hoodie and jeans and some Jordan tennis shoes, right? And I think at the end of the day, I think society has conformed us to say we have to look and dress a certain way in order to be respected. And I feel like that's not, in my personal opinion, that's not correct. I feel like you should respect somebody regardless of their classification, of their race, ethnicity, wealth class, and X, Y, and Z, regardless of what they got on, regardless if they're the best looking person, the most well groomed, not X, Y, and Z. You should respect anybody's opinion. You should respect anybody if they have an issue about something. So don't ever feel like where you come from or who you are can ever deter you to being an activist, because regardless, every you can always pinpoint an issue or something that's going on. You can speak out regardless. So never be afraid to step out based on who you are, who you think you might be, or who you might not think will respect your opinion.
Right.
Thank you, guys. So your next question, Asia from Liberty High asks, what changes in education do you think need to be implemented to start the conversation and prevent widespread ignorance of Black history and the current struggle?
Well, maybe I'll take that one first. You know, I said a little bit earlier, I talked about the fact that our history never gets told. You know, one of the things that I am really disappointed about is that when we first began the process of considering Martin Luther King birthday, I wanted that to be an in-school holiday where all students, white, Black, regardless of whatever your persuasion was, learned about the history of Black people. Unfortunately, though, we made it an out-of-school holiday and nobody got to learn much of anything about our history because we spent that time either not going to the programs that were planned or whatever. In school, I think would have been better. We need to teach our own history. We need to insist that the history books tell the real story of who built this country, because this country was built on the backs of slaves. That's unfortunate, but that's where we came from. And we need to know that. Younger people today, I'm afraid, don't really have a good appreciation for the kinds of things that our fathers went through building this country. But they need to know. You know, you look at the past to determine the future.
Picking back up to Dr. Robinson again, one of my current studies right now for my graduate school is talking about how a lot of different teachers were scared to talk about anything Black related in their curriculums because they feel like they was going to invoke emotion, anger from their students. And that goes to show that in our institutions, in our schools, especially in our public schools, we can't have educators who are scared to talk about your students' history, right? I think we all know what the plight of African American and Blacks have done for history, but we cannot sit here and say as if Blacks have not made significant contribution in like different respective parts of history, right? And I think that the leadership starts from the top, from our school board, from our superintendent on down, that we have to have the message to our curriculums, our educators and teachers and staff, that we need to implement Black history into the curriculum further than Dr. King. All respect to Dr. King, Malcolm X, Rosa Parks, but it's so much that's only like a small scratch of the surface.
Yeah.
And it's so much of a vault of information, Black history to myself. I did not learn to after I got out the school system. And that's sad because I feel like I should have learned that while I was in high school, middle school, and elementary school. Like you can start off teach. I knew about Dr. King in elementary school. Why not teaching about that the first red light was created by the African American? I should learn that in elementary school, right? And so we can't be afraid of the approach. We cannot be afraid to be unapologetically Black and be wanting to be progressive in the information we give our kids, and not just Black kids, kids of any race and ethnicity, right? Because we have to, I think over time, we say, like I think a lot of people say, you cannot teach racism, you cannot be born with racism, right? It's taught. It's a skill that is learned and that is looked at and is embedded in somebody's mind over a period of time. And so if you teaching kids that are non-Black about the plight and history of African Americans, I think from there you will lower the chances of that child becoming racially insensitive in different spaces, right? And I think when you expose them and they start respecting, okay, wow, mommy, I learned about the red light was made by a Black man, by a Black woman. And so maybe, you know, maybe I can help my Black friend do the same thing. Or maybe when I get older, when he gets older, he thinks about that. He's like, wow, like my fellow Black person, like I respect that because I know your history already, right? So I think that goes to show we can't just be scared, and we cannot straddle the fence about implementing Black history, because Black history is American history. And so when we start taking away Black history, now you're telling half of the American story.
That's right.
Thank you, guys. That question really led into this one. And your next question is from Caitlin at Liberty High. How can African Americans in the school district help incorporate Black history and culture into schools?
Well, one of the things, of course, they can do is to, in addition to insisting that it be taught by their teachers, is to talk about it themselves, to learn about it. You know, they have to know what that history is. And there are ways of getting that information. It's just not readily available in the classroom and through the textbooks. But, you know, want to know, be inquisitive, be willing to do your research and find out who did what. You know, Anthony talked about the red light. Well, Eli Whitney did the cotton gin. You think about all the cotton in the South. That was a major, major advancement, and it was done by a Black man.
For me, I think you have to, like I say, a lot of those decisions I know start from the top, as far as like curriculums, like start from the top when you're superintendent, school board members, X, Y, and Z. And at the end of the day, you know, you can have a lot of people who push the issue about wanting Black history, but we have to motivate the students to want it, right? And I think if students understand their history, they're going to be hungry for more. So that's when they become advocates of going to the school board, or going to their superintendent, or going to high-ranking official within the school district and saying, hey, as a student in the East Baton Rouge school system, I want to know more about my Black history. I want my classmates to know more. So I think, like I said, I'm so glad Humanities Amped doing sessions like this, to where, like, wow, maybe a student who's watching this right now might write a letter to their school board member and say, hey, I want more sessions like this. Oh, I want more information in my classroom outside of Black History Month that talks about the history of Black people and how Black people intertwine in American history. So I think more events, more resources such as this, it will invigorate students, but we have to give students the platform and know they have the opportunity to voice their opinion. Because the biggest consumer, the biggest person on an investor in a school district is a student. It's a East Baton Rouge school system, which is for the students, right? And then from there, students have to understand that your voice matters, but they have to use their voice to say, hey, I want to know more about my Black history in the school district.
You're on mute, Brianna.
Sorry, guys, my computer froze for a second there. Technical difficulties. But your next question, Dr. Robertson, is, as a former EBR PSS school board president, can you tell us what you think is needed now for our school system to best serve Black children?
Well, you know, we need a school board, as we did in my day, now, who puts the student first. I mean, so many times people who serve in those positions get caught up in what's they're all about and not concentrate on what's best for the student. And I tried over my 22 and a half years that I was on the school board to get the people on the board, the superintendent, the governor, the community, to understand that it's what was in the best interest of the student that was important. If that could ever happen, our educational system will take leaps and bounds immediately. But that's not what happens, unfortunately.
Anthony?
Restate the last part of the question real quick, if you don't mind.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was for Dr. Robinson. The next question, which will be the last question, is also for Dr. Robinson. And it says, what is the biggest obstacle you had to overcome as a young activist in Baton Rouge? And what would you like to tell young activists to be aware of?
I think the biggest obstacle was my own reluctance to get involved in what was going on in my community and around me. There's nothing to stop anyone from being an activist. As Anthony and I have pointed out, you just need to have that fire burning within your soul to make a change for the better. And, you know, different people will have different ideas of what that better may be, but that's okay. But then you get together and you talk about it and you share ideas and you trade back and forth. And, you know, but that fire inside your belly to make the change is the thing that you got to have. And if you don't have that, you're not going to be an activist. You're not going to get things done because you're what? You're going to sit by, you're going to watch, and you're going to complain, and you're not going to get out there and lead.
Well, I want to say thank you, Dr. Robinson and Anthony, for inspiring us today with your wisdom. You embody the spirit of beloved community and Sankofa in the way that you live your lives. Let's take what we can from this dialogue and pass it on. We want to thank everyone for attending our first and second event today, and we invite you to visit us at www.humanitiesamped.com to learn more about our ongoing work and our sponsors. We give a special shout out to our partners at Metromorphosis and the East Baton Rouge Parish School Board System for making this event possible. If you are a young person who wants to be a part of Humanities Amped, please go to the Get Involved page of our website, which is being dropped in the chat right now. We offer after-school programs that are all about your voice. Our motto is that young people are not problems to be solved, they are problem solvers. Teachers, visit our website to see how you can be involved in our Educator Learning Committee. We're working with our partners in the EBR PSS to amplify well-being, critical literacy, and civic-minded problem solving together every day. If you enjoy this event, you will love our final event, Fresh Heat, the Griot edition. Through an engaging poetry set and workshop, we will pay tribute to our elders and talk about Black life in America. Now we will take another break.